international sympathy for the Jewish people. The British, exhausted by the war and unable to control the escalating violence in Palestine, decided to hand over the problem to the newly formed United Nations. On November 29, 1947, the United Nations General Assembly voted on a partition plan. This plan recommended dividing Palestine into two independent states, one Arab and one Jewish, with Jerusalem to be administered as an international city. The Jewish leadership accepted the plan, seeing it as a historic opportunity to achieve their dream of statehood. However, the Arab states and the Arab leadership in Palestine rejected it completely. As the British prepared to withdraw, the stage was set for a final confrontation. On May 14, 1948, the day before the British mandate officially ended, David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency, declared the establishment of the State of Israel. The birth of the State of Israel was immediately followed by a war for its survival. The very next day after its declaration of independence, the armies of 5 neighboring Arab countries, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, invaded the new state. Their stated goal was to destroy Israel and prevent the UN partition plan from being implemented. The conflict, known to Israelis as the War of Independence and to Palestinians as the Nakba, or catastrophe, was fierce and costly. The newly formed and poorly equipped Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, fought desperately against the invading armies. The war was, a defining moment for the young country, forging a national identity centered on self-reliance and military strength. The war ended in 1949 with a series of armistice agreements, but not a final peace treaty. Israel had survived and even expanded the territory it controlled beyond what the UN partition plan had proposed. But the war had profound consequences for both sides. For Israel, it came at the cost of about 1% of its population. For the Palestinians, the outcome was devastating. Around 700,000 Palestinian Arabs fled or were expelled from their homes in the territory that became Israel. They became refugees in neighboring Arab countries, and their displacement created a refugee problem that remains a central issue in the conflict to this day. The 1949 armistice lines became Israel's de facto borders for nearly 2 decades. The years that followed were not peaceful. Israel remained surrounded by hostile states that refused to recognize its existence. Tensions frequently boiled over into smaller conflicts and border skirmishes. In 1967, these tensions erupted into another major conflict, the Six-Day War. In a stunning and swift military victory, Israel defeated the combined forces of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. In just 6 days, Israel captured significant territory, the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. The capture of East Jerusalem, including the Old City and the Western Wall, was an event of immense emotional and religious significance for the Jewish people. This victory dramatically changed the map of the Middle East and the nature of the conflict. Israel was no longer a small, vulnerable state fighting for survival, but a regional military power occupying large amounts of Arab land. This occupation of the West Bank and Gaza brought millions of Palestinians under Israeli military rule, which would become a major source of ongoing conflict and international controversy. Another major war, the Yom Kippur War, broke out in 1973 when Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. Though Israel was caught off guard and suffered heavy initial losses, it eventually managed to push back the attacking armies, reaffirming its military strength but also showing its vulnerability. Despite the history of constant conflict, there have been significant efforts to achieve peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors. The first and most dramatic breakthrough came in the late 1970s. Following the shock of the 1973 Yom Kippur War, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat made a historic decision. He became the first Arab leader to travel to Israel and speak before its parliament, the Knesset, in 1977. This courageous act opened the door for direct negotiations. With the help of U.S. President Jimmy Carter, Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, and Sadat met at Camp David. These talks led to the signing of the Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty in 1979. Israel agreed to withdraw completely from the Sinai Peninsula in exchange for full peace and diplomatic recognition from Egypt. The peace with Egypt was a monumental achievement, proving that a negotiated settlement was possible. However, peace with other neighbors, especially on the Palestinian front, proved much more difficult. In the late 1980s, the first Intifada, or uprising, began in the West Bank and Gaza. It was a grassroots Palestinian protest against the ongoing Israeli military occupation, characterized by widespread demonstrations, strikes, and civil disobedience, but also by acts of violence. The Intifada brought the Palestinian issue to the forefront of the world's attention and put pressure on both sides to find a political solution. This eventually led to secret negotiations between Israeli and Palestinian leaders in Norway. These secret talks resulted in the Oslo Accords, signed on the White House lawn in 1993. The agreement was historic. The Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, led by Yasser Arafat, officially recognized Israel's right to exist. In return, Israel recognized the PLO as the representative of the Palestinian people. The accords created the Palestinian Authority, giving it limited self-rule over parts of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. It was intended to be the first step toward a final peace treaty that would resolve all the major issues like borders, refugees, and the status of Jerusalem. For a time there was great hope that a lasting peace was finally within reach. Unfortunately, the promise of the Oslo Accords was never fully realized. The process was derailed by extremists on both sides.